Episode 279. Today we're going to be talking about Ivan Demidov's NHL debut upcoming against the Blackhawks in just under 2 hours now. And going to be a very exciting day for Montreal. I'm personally a Blackhawks fan, so it's going to be interesting to see how this situation plays out. Montreal's pushing for a playoff spot. They have Ivan Demidov in a third line role with Alex Newhook. And I believe Joel Armia, and I believe that's the trio. I know their second line is Anderson with Dvorak and Gallagher, one of the better lines, one of the more underrated lines in the league. And then the top line's pretty self-explainable there. And I think when you look at Ivan Demidov, just the combination of skill, the raw talent, the raw innate ability, I think there's going to be a lot of flash in his game, and that's what he's going to try and bring. He's going to bring creativity. He's going to bring some flash. He might frustrate Marty St. Louis at times defensively, but I think it's going to be a learning curve for him, and he's going to showcase that creativity right away. I wouldn't be surprised if he's out there and matched up against his buddy Artem Levshinov just for an added factor of motivation, but I think with Demidov, you're getting a just it's really hard to explain because I think he's more technically advanced and more advanced than Matvei Michkov. And we're seeing what Matvei Michkov can do in Philly right now. And it's so unique in that sense because Demidov's a far better skater and pretty similar in terms of the puck skills, the hockey sense, and the IQ. So I'd be curious to see if long term Demidov could actually become a better player than Michkov and how that whole situation could play out. I think there's a lot more potential for Demidov long term. I think just the combination, there's skill, there's talent, there's skating, there's everything there. And then you just add to it how he's been able to basically generate a ton of offense in the KHL right away in his draft plus one season, leading a premier team like Ska in scoring is really unique. And I think that's going to allow him to translate a little bit easier to the NHL. It's not like he's coming out of junior. It's not like he's coming out of college. He's coming straight from another pro league, another top premier program, and he's going to almost a lateral adjacent move to the NHL. And the KHL, I would say, is the second best league behind the NHL. And I think with what Ivan Demidov was able to do as a U20 player, surpassing records of guys like Kucherov and Tarasenko and Kaprizov, and being able to have that reputation to his name already, I think he's going to become an even better player than we'd even anticipate long term. And I think he could push for a really good playoff role because Montreal looks like they're going to get in and secure that last spot on that wild card and get into the playoffs. And it sure looks that way now. And with Demidov, just the whole situation, how it's played out, I think he can give something to that top nine that they don't necessarily have. Like they have a bunch of premier players in that top nine. I think Demidov, you could argue, could become the most creative of all of them. And that's pretty interesting to say because that's a top nine that includes guys like Yuri Slafkovsky, Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and some more guys. And then add to that in the back end, you have Lane Hudson. Like there's a good core, good young core surrounding itself in Montreal. And I think long term there's going to be more of that and there's going to be more players who can really just jump into spots right away in Montreal because they already seem to have a really good young core, and it's just about taking that next step when it comes to developing them. I think with Demidov, I don't see him being in a third line role for long. I just think he's going to be on a third line role to start. I think he's only going to go up from here, really. I don't really see him becoming a fourth liner either. I think he can only go up in terms of the lines that he's on. So that's also an advantage because if he's starting on the third line and if he scores or has a multi-point game or whatever tonight, and we'll be seeing him in the top six for a longer period of time than just now. And you could even argue that he could be better than Patrick Laine, and especially throughout their playoff run. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I think Demidov has the skill, the raw creativity, and has turned into more of a well-rounded player in the KHL. I think last year it was often talked about him how he's just one-dimensional, and some of that was true, especially playing in the MHL, a junior league where he wasn't necessarily developing. He was showcasing a ton of his skill and his finesse, but really, he didn't need to be there. He didn't need to be in the NHL. I think him being in the KHL's turned him into more of a complete player. There were times where with Sky, he was playing 6 minutes a night, and there are other times where he was playing almost 30. So the range in which he was playing was pretty intense. And there were times where I think he's looked even better defensively this year. And just having that component to his game, playing with Ska and being able to add a little bit more to that before hopping on over to Montreal, I think it was really important for him. And really, you don't need to worry about the offensive creativity and flash and stuff. There's such a high ceiling there. You don't really have to worry about much there. It's just more focusing on allowing him to establish that and have that finesse, have that flair, while also at the same time being able to allow him to develop into a well-rounded player, a defensive player. A but I think the thing is with offensive guys like him is you don't want to put him and shelter him in a defensive role because it's not who he is, right? If you're playing players out of their true identity, that's not going to help him either. So just playing him in shutdown role is not going to help. You have to allow him to flourish offensively in order for him to develop, because that's where you really want him to develop the most is offensively. You're not going to be as concerned about his defensive play because the defensive play, like any young player in the NHL that we've talked about for decades upon decades, they need to learn the defensive game. That's just how it is. And any young player has to. So it's not just one particular player, it's every player has to learn. So it's Demidov will learn over time. He's going to have to adapt, and he will adapt. I think his game is built on adaptability, especially when you watch his highlights in his offensive game. It's built on adaptability. So if he can do that in the O zone, I would not be surprised if he's able to do that in the D zone quicker than we anticipate. I think he's going to be a well-rounded player long term. He's going to be a two-way player long term, and for the short term in the next, I would say 3, 4, 5 years, he's going to be more of an offensive guy. But long term, there's definitely defensive potential in his game as well.